Welcome back to Inklings Behind the Scenes. This is J.S. Bray with Mr. Bray Labs. And today we have part four. Part four of our Creating a Production Bible. On a previous episode, we talked about taking things personal, understanding kind of aspects of coping and art. Art therapy, intervention. We talked about how you have bias. We talked a lot of really big psychological terms, and we talked why that's important. And because, again, I also gave a little bit of my credentials only so that you can understand that I'm not just making this stuff up. I'm not reading from a Wikipedia. I'm reading from a person who spent tuition and learned the hard way, the expensive way. But also, if you want to go back and check out those episodes, please feel free to go back and check them out kind of for your own edification. Learn about this stuff because it will impact what you do, what you see, what you say. All right, so this episode, okay, we're going to talk about art therapy, but we're also going to talk about art in the sense of communication, color theory, branding, and designing. Okay, we only scraped just a tiny bit of that information on our last episode. We talked a little bit why that matters as far as color psychology, but now we're going to go a little bit deeper. So last episode, we talked about Facebook's logo, how it is really deliberately designed to disarm you. And we also talked about taking things personal. So it is important to take things personal. But how do we move outside of our personal preferences? And how do we develop branding that is it can reach a larger audience? So I'm going to talk for a little bit about something that does not make sense, and it seems like this would not relate. Talk about when you do your taxes. When you do your taxes, the government, now I'm talking about how you do your taxes in America, the government recognizes you as a person. They recognize you as an identity. Okay. If you go and you drum up your business license, you have to register, you get an EIN, you get a tax number, right? And then at that point, the government now sees the company as a identity. So the company has now become a person. They see them as a person, and they tax them like they do a person. And so sometimes their taxes are quite complex, but because they take them as a person, a brand starts off as a person. Okay? A brand starts off as a person. If you look at someone's business card, logo, design, these things, again, this is the hard part, is that we have such rich media saturation, right? There's so much media saturation, technology is everywhere, that it's easy to forget how we got here. It's almost to think like you look at a television and say, that must have been a miracle. If for some reason people forgot how to build televisions, heaven forbid, I would think there's a great deal of people would be scratching their head at what to do. We stand on the shoulders of giants. How many people could build their own computer or iPhone or circuit, home, make their own clothes? Each generation sort of gets further and further from raw material, from the source. And that can be called progress, but it also can be a point where you forget that it takes a step at a time to get that far away. Sometimes I think it's clear progress. Healthy drinking water, these things like that, that's good, right? But if you want to build a brand, you need to be personal. And I'm going to give you an example. So your business cards actually started from a long time ago when a person wanted to court you. What does courting mean in our today's society where everyone dates? There's a million dating apps. So if you liked someone, and this is when I say if in this situation, if it was a gentleman, a man, and a gentleman usually meant someone who of affluence, or somebody who of some sort of means. And so if he saw a suitor, saw a lovely lady, he would give her his card. He said, "I would like to court you." He'll give her his card, his name, and so it was kind of like the first business card. But he would give this to this lady and say, "I would like to court you," and she'd have that card. Go, Mr. So-and-so, gentleman, blah, 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 like that sort of ooey gooey eyes kind of could melt into one another's, loving affection. But that was kind of the first sort of takeaway, oddly enough. But it's still sort of similar. That intention to court someone is kind of the purpose of a business card. To say hello, say, "Hey, I'd like to court you. I'd like to get to know you." And that's why you have them. That's why you design them. Business cards do relate to what we're going to do because business cards are part of branding. Okay, branding is not a big soulless corporation. Branding is a person. Start as branding as a person. If you can't think of branding as a person, okay, then you have failed. And listen, if you cannot think of it because your brand's gotten too big or too this or that, you have not thought of it first. If you cannot think of what it is like to be as a person, then you have lost the point of a brand. Because what a person could do that a giant conglomeration can't do is a person can meet another person. A person can speak to another person. A person can take time and make the other person feel valued. Right? This is important. We're building a branding aspect to our creative, to our production Bible. We're building that branding out on purpose. And it's going to evolve, right? Just like you grow and evolve. You've learned a great deal of things to bring you where you are today. And that is important. That is one of the things where I almost feel like it's a shame that we live such short lives because we learn so much while we're here. And some people more, some people less, but it's a shame that we leave so quickly. And so when we're building branding, we want to be personal. We want to build, and we've talked about building these characters in such a way where they all have an iconic branding. But like I said, in those days of courtship, where there was commonplace for courtship, you would give the maiden a card, and you'd say, "I'd like to court you." And I want to talk about how we're going to do the same thing with our design and our productions. So that's great because there's a similar thing occurred around this time, especially during the Industrial Revolution. So this is something I've probably shared to nauseum to some of my students, but it's also something that really helps. So during the Industrial Revolution, we started streamlining things. Things like the cotton gin, steel mills, and all these different things got these titans of industry. Okay, they created things that I don't know if they'll ever be as powerful today as they were back then. Like, let me stop for a second. If you think for just a moment, a barge or a train, these two gigantic vehicles. I mean, we're talking massive amount of energy and steel and like work that go into them. If you think that whatever you're building is as powerful as that, please tell me. I'd love to hear it because ultimately there's no greater movers of materials and sources than a barge and a train. Nobody has maxed that out. Okay, we're talking 100 plus years. No one has created a better design than a train or a better design than a boat, a giant boat. And it's weird. These things have been around for a really long time. So during the time of the Industrial Revolution, so I'm not minimizing that experience, that had a really powerful impact on all cultures everywhere, okay, especially political landscapes. But during this time, when people they lived in a time where it was called the cottage years. So before like the Industrial Revolution, there was the cottage years. People who like lived in cottages, and they were whole groups of little pockets of family. And somebody would bring along kind of source material, like they would bring maybe wool or flax or something that needed to be weaved or put together, and they would bring it over to the cottage. And the mother or the father, they would take those materials and they would divvy amongst the children, and they'd wash it and process it and sew and do all that sort of stuff. They would all kind of be on their own little pocket home making studio. They'd be a little maker's house, right? They would build things as a home. I love that. That era, to me, while I was never there, has a fondness to me for a person who prefers working from home, who always have a bias for other people to be able to work from home because it gives you the freedom and the friction, but the freedom to see your kids more, to have lunch with your wife, to see certain aspects of life that might be mundane, but to be home for dinner. I mean, these are things that I think are really great. If you can be home more than a handful of times a week with your family, you are an incredibly privileged person. Okay, because many different people throughout many times have not had that opportunity, but the cottagers did. Okay, the people in the Industrial Revolution did not. People who previous agricultural world, like they did not. They would work all day, and they might be able to see their loved ones. And that's the point I'm trying to get, is that things have changed. We stand on the progress of that, and we take advantage of that. But we also get blinders. We forget some of when I say we, But you forget what brought you to this day where you can look at a design and you can talk about branding so disconnected from the toil that brought it there. So during the Industrial Revolution, you used to know, so before that, you used to know who would make your hat or your candlesticks or your shoes or these materials. You had a direct relationship with the people that created your goods and your services. We had a little of that during, I believe, the 50s when people would have a milkman, come to your house and deliver you milk, or even ice. Kind of the door-to-door kind of classic days. They might have a resurgence. I think that would be wonderful if we did. If instead of always getting from Big Milk or Big Bread or Big whatever that you had that sort of service. It may not be economical, but it seems incredibly charming to have that sort of personal take. We have in some ways. Delivery services, courier services has kind of taken some aspect of that. But with Amazon, FedEx, UPS, USPS in the States, these sort of couriers, and I think there's DHX or DHL or whatever. There's these other ones that sort of these couriers. It's easy to lose that connectivity. You used to be able to have that person that was your postal person. Some places still have it, but if you lose that connectivity, if you lose that personalness, how do you do that? How do you regain this? How do you get people to trust you? Because remember, we're trying to get people to trust us. We're telling a story. We're building a relationship. Well, you create a design. You create a logo. How do we know? How do I know that I'm really, connecting with, Joe's candlestick, Joe's brother's candlestick by creating a logo, branding. And so they would go out of their way to design a logo, design some sort of mark or typography. They would do the study, they do the research. Sometimes they didn't do the research. They just picked a font that was contemporary, like Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is an iconic brand with probably the most, I would say, time-locked logo. It's timeless. It's become timeless. But if Coca-Cola was to give rise today, I highly doubt that it would have that script font. And it's not about legibility. It's just about the fact that the font is so personal that it emerged from a time that it was personal to see that good script font, that red, that classic red and white. It caught you. Those colors are on purpose, and we may have a chance to talk about those specific colors because I'm looking at myself thinking, talking about color psychology and talking about color, talking about communication through design and branding. I'm quite long-winded, and I can probably take a great deal of time getting off on some tangents, but I want to tell you, Coca-Cola design used a contemporary script, and that contemporary script, it was a way of saying, hey, we're a real company. This is who we are. This is the product we have. Please, understand this is trying to connect people. Now, Coca-Cola, and this is a tangent, Coca-Cola used to have certain ingredients it does not have anymore. So it was what we considered now an illegal substance. And so the thing is that your brand is going to evolve, but it needs to first connect with people. And we look at creating our production Bible in a similar manner. If your characters are not iconic, if you're not thinking 7 layers deep of how the branding connects with people, then you haven't thought long enough. And that's not in itself bad. Okay, there are times that you want to just get it done, do something, have some sort of cathartic experience. But that's not what a production Bible is. Production Bible shows that you've turned over every rock, that you thought about everything, and that you took in a great deal of time to try to personalize your characters, personalize the story, that people could look at it and see it as iconic. So, God rest his soul, the great, prolific writer and comic book character creator, Stan Lee. He was a firm believer in this. Stan Lee used to say, I want you to be able to see a toe of a character or a hand or a thumb and know from their silhouette who they are. Now, that's quite the feat. But Stan Lee, he didn't draw these comic books, he wrote them. But he wanted a visible, he wanted that silhouette that you knew that was Spider-Man. That from that strong silhouette, that's an X-Men character. And Stan Lee, in many ways, I think he was an absolute genius. He was a really likable guy. And he created really the heroes and myths for multiple generations. And so I think it's sage advice to listen to the sage, which is Stan Lee, and to think about why that's important. Okay, he took a dive into an industry that really was lowbrow for a really long time, and comic books struggled more than any industry when it came through different eras, because they started out more, they were playful, then they went more towards political, then they moved towards they were there for the troops, and then back and forth. They've had to kind of ride different generational lines, and so that's sort of a powerful thing, because like Marvel Comics is now part of the Disney fold, but Marvel Comics, it it started out really bluegrass. Like it started out really, grassroots. It started out really grassroots, and it really was sort of a humble little comic shop if you compare it to some of the other thriving comic books going on at the time. And also, while these sort of things happen with media, because comic books became a way to really politicize on what was happening in the world. There was an opportunity for people to make revenue. Like I'm diving for a moment. A comic book had its own ecosystem. A comic book itself had its own ecosystem. It still does to some degree, but think about it. You look at a comic book, and you can tell from a few different cues right at the top, like, okay, this is this character. There's a logo. There's a name, right? This is this issue. Boop, tells me with issue. And with just one flash in the pan, I can tell you a great deal. Oh, it was marked for this price. It has this seal on it. It was written by this author. It has this signature on it. A comic book is just flash, boom. It's kind of a perfect lesson in branding, is to go to your comic book store and look at old comic books. Hey, you can look whatever you want about new comics, but those people have been standing on the shoulders of giants for decades. Go find a comic book from no earlier than the 80s. Okay, so I'm talking like no newer than 1980 something. Okay, and look at them up. Look at the cheap comic books, right? Even then they figured it out. And keep going back. If your comic book store has it, you can see that if you are a lover of comics, you're learning about branding. You're learning about deliberate message. Now you open that comic book, and on the inside page, to the right is going to be a splash page. To the left, maybe something else. Sometimes it was an advertisement. And so these comic book companies knew that they had a loyal readership. And they knew that because they knew they had a loyal readership, they also knew how to gear messages towards that loyal readership. And they also knew how, in such a way that they would actually give you, if you open the comic books, they would give you cliffhangers that are on the right page. And I don't mean like the right as in correct page. I mean on the right page. They would have a character going, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe." And then you turn it, "It's you, Jimmy. I haven't seen you since Tuesday." And like, oh, okay. So they'd build this anticipation. And a comic book has an ebb and flow. Now, the anatomy of comic books are something that I can wax and wane on for a long time, but you're still doing the same thing. You're still trying to tease emotions out of people, getting people gripped to read. Really, what is, for a comic book, 23, maybe 26 pages total, if you remove the ads. It's a small, short little bite, little flavor hit of story to get people to want to buy the next story. And in some ways, that's sort of the assurance, right, that they're going to keep coming back. But that's also the pleasure that you gave them. You gave them a good time. You gave them 23 to 26 pages of beautiful art, engaging story, and a ton of a purposeful, branded, crafted message. So why that matters to you when you're developing your brand. You have to realize that is going to be your job. For as long as you want to be a storyteller, everyone's going to be fighting for other people's attention. Okay? That's why if you can't figure this out now, hammering out how to be personal with people, realizing that certain colors matter, then you're going to be sort of just shooting in the dark. And that's not the goal. The goal is not to be in the dark, to just basically just guessing along the way. And so let's move forward. Now we're going to talk specifically about a few different domains of psychology, and specifically into the realm of color psychology and color theory. So color theory is actually something that you can look up anywhere, everywhere, and I won't do a great deal of it. I'm just going to tell you that certain colors recede and certain colors come forward. cool colors, okay, a cool color will recede, warm colors come forward. And if you know this, if you can master this, that color choice and selection is going to have a great way of capturing people's attention. Okay, look at some of the most popular animations that have occurred in the last decades and decades. These animations have selected the colors on purpose. The Simpsons, iconic Simpsons, been around for so long, it's practically like one of those soap operas that never end. Funny tangent, but I think we were at the hospital when my wife was having our son, and we were one particular hospital bed. They turned on a show, and it was Young and the Restless. And I'll tell you nothing about that. None of those characters looked young. They were past retirement age, and I thought that was quite funny. But the point I'm trying to get at is that we want to tell stories that are engaging. But the Simpsons deliberately chose yellow. The yellow and blue are eye-catching. They're these primary colors that immediately draw people in. Now, they have been refined, but if you were to bring like Simpsons into real life, think about that over-the-top magenta background. Ooh, my eyes are hurting just thinking about it, but yet we've been conditioned to it. These almost like tube colors. And tube color is like straight from the tube of paint. That was deliberate. That sort of messaging is on purpose. So ask yourself, what are the colors that you're choosing? If you're going to choose a color that is maybe more subtle, say it's a slight brown or a beige, or these something that's artistic. That's cool. You can choose any colors you want with your messaging, but you do have to take the time to ask yourself, why does that make you feel a certain way? Create a word map. Sometimes I do this. Sometimes I take a great deal of time thinking about these emotions, about how a certain color makes me feel. But it also has to align with the personality. See, that's the beautiful thing about thinking about a production Bible. When you're creating colors and color fonts and all this colors and fonts and logos that tie into your characters, you can say, hey, this is why blue works with Kafka. And the reason why I say it works with Kafka, because Kafka, he's trusting. He's a trusting person. It's not only is it that he's trying to disarm you, he actually is disarming himself. He's trusting of others. He is very naive. And he's also the kind of person that doesn't want to be robbed of that naivety. He enjoys it. He enjoys being surprised, because being surprised for him is the cornerstone of happiness. And so that is why he likes blue. Then you take a character like Bronte. She has pink. Now, pink, we've been attributed to as being a feminine color, but pink also has a sense of disarming people as well. They have done studies on this, which is kind of bonkers, but the color pink will actually pacify people. They've done this at certain schools and even places of correctional facilities where they've painted the walls pink to pacify people. And I sometimes challenge how true that is, but I still find that the fact that somebody has taken the time to say, hey, if we could maybe in this particular place, where there's agitators or people who have a lot of friction and who don't know how to cope with their emotions, maybe if we can get them to subdue that just a moment so that we can actually get through the day, that might not be a bad idea. But Bronte does that. She pacifies people with her storytelling. She pacifies people with her motherly nature. She pacifies people because part of that's what every good mother does, is she gets her children calm. She knows how to kind of diffuse certain situations. And that's a really beautiful thing. So I thank you so much again. Today's episode has been, just been another meal that we're making out of color design and theory. And I just pray that you're doing well. I ask that you continue to like and subscribe. Thank you for being part of this community, and I hope you all have a blessed day.